Everyone, we'd like to thank you for joining us for today's Licensing and Compliance for the Electronic Security Industry webinar, sponsored by ESA's Installation and Service Professionals Group. My name is Mark Grossman. I'm the Vice President of Branch Operations for ASG Security and also the Chair for the ISP Group. I'm also joined by my partner in crime, Trevor Block, who is the Vice President of Field Operations for Guardian Protection Services and our Vice Chair for our Installation and Service Professionals Group. We'll be hosting the webinar together. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. All of you will be muted for the duration of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please make sure you use the chat log that should be in the pane on the right of your screen. We've set aside some time at the end of the presentation, so all of your questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar, depending on how much time we have. Also, we have included a couple of polls throughout the webinar, so please be sure to take a moment to answer each of those as they appear on your screen. The poll will override the presentation, but as soon as you answer the poll, the presentation will reappear, so we thank you for that. Additionally, a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be available in the ISP resource library on our website, which is esaweb.org. Today's webinar on licensing and compliance is presented by Kate Fisher, the Managing Member of Compliance Management Solutions. CMS provides licensing and compliance products and services exclusively to the electronic security industry. So she has a unique perspective on these things. Ms. Fisher began her compliance career managing the licensing and compliance department for a large national security integrator based in Charlotte, North Carolina. She has also performed consulting services to the industry for process development, compliance management, quality and service improvement, and operational management. Ms. Fisher formed Compliance Management Solutions in 2011 to offer security companies a simple and cost-effective alternative to managing their own complex and time-consuming compliance requirements. Services range from single a la carte activities to fully outsourced solutions. Ms. Fisher holds a bachelor's degree in business management from the University of North Carolina and holds several certifications, including being loss prevention qualified, NTS Level 1 certified, and Six Sigma certified as a green belt. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you. Before we start, I would like to just go over what we will be covering today. We're going to start with the 8 components of compliance to provide a brief overview of each piece of licensing and compliance for electronic security companies. Then we'll talk about some specific items that are involved when expanding your business. We'll also address some additional considerations for those companies that subcontract some or all of their installation or repair services. And finally, we'll cover some ways in which you can save time or money by leveraging efficiencies like reciprocity. So let's start with the basics. A lot of companies focus on a few of these components and pay little or no attention to the others. But the fact is that ignoring just one of these areas exposes your company to potential fines and other disciplinary actions, like cease and desist orders, license suspensions, or even revocation. So let's quickly review each of the 8 components. You must register your business in every state in which you wish to conduct business. When registering your business in a state other than your home state, you'll receive what's called a certificate of authority. To obtain a certificate of authority, you'll generally pay a fee and provide a certificate of good standing from your home state. Some states will also require that you provide a complete set of your articles of incorporation. All states will require that you provide a mailing address inside their state. It cannot be a P.O. box. You can contract with a registered agent service to satisfy this requirement, or you can use a non-commercial agent. It could be a friend, an employee, a relative. Whoever you use, they are responsible for accepting legal documents on your behalf, as well as forwarding your mail to you. Most states have some sort of annual or biannual filing requirement. These are often called annual reports. Generally, you'll be asked to list your officers and directors and confirm your physical and mailing address. Most states do charge a fee for the report, and it varies by state and your type of business. The fee is usually very small. However, there are some states that calculate the fee using your authorized or issued shares or even your revenue. In these states, the fee can be more significant depending upon the particulars of your business. You're also subject to tax filing requirements such as sales and use tax and franchise tax. Be sure not to ignore your state filings. If you fail to submit these reports, it will result in revocation of your certificate of authority, which means you'll no longer be allowed to conduct business in that state. State licenses. Once you've obtained your certificate of authority, you can apply for any business or professional licenses that you need at the state level. Licenses for companies providing electronic security equipment basically fall into two camps. You have alarm business licenses and contractor licenses, which are frequently a low-voltage license category. For instance, in Alabama, California, Virginia, Oklahoma, South Carolina, among others, they have alarm or electronic security licenses, whereas Georgia, Kentucky, Idaho, Maine, New Mexico, and West Virginia, they require an electrical license. A few states do require both. For instance, in North Carolina, to sell, install, service, or monitor burglar alarms, the company has to have a burglar alarm business license from the Alarm Systems Licensing Board, but in order to obtain that alarm license, an employee of the business must also hold a North Carolina electrical license. Local licenses. Not every state licenses alarm companies or low-voltage contractors at the state level. Sometimes this is done at the local level. As an example, New Hampshire, Colorado, and Ohio, among others, do not have state licensing requirements for alarm companies. Word of caution, you will often encounter local licensing requirements even in states which do have licensing at the state level. So this could be a local business license or an alarm company registration with the local police or sheriff's department in the local jurisdictions in which you're selling, installing, or monitoring security equipment. It's very important not to overlook local licensing requirements because local licensing authorities are often better at detecting unlicensed activity, and they often generate more fines. They often use alarm user permits or dispatch requests to identify unlicensed activity. For instance, in St. Louis, Missouri, they require that the installed alarm system be registered prior to requesting a dispatch. In order to obtain that user permit, the install permit has to be listed. But in order to obtain the install permit, the alarm company must be licensed. Employee registration. Many states have employee registration requirements. Typically, salespeople, technicians, monitoring center employees, and other employees with access to circumventional information must be registered. Circumventional information is typically defined as confidential information relating to a customer's alarm system. Things like passcodes, equipment locations, or system design and operation. A few states even require that all employees be registered regardless of their job duties. Registration normally involves an application, a fingerprint card, sometimes a background check, and a fee. Sometimes certain training is required as a condition of registration, such as NTS Level 1. Another component of compliance is continuing education. Most states have continuing education requirements for the qualifier as well as the registered employees. CE requirements vary greatly from state to state, but many states have approved some of the same courses and course providers. This means that with some careful planning, you can find courses that are approved in multiple states and reduce the total number of course hours you have to take. Installation permits. This was mentioned earlier with local licenses, so I won't say much here, but I just want to point out that this is an important part of compliance for alarm companies that are installing equipment. Failure to obtain an install permit when required can cause problems downstream for the monitoring company as well as the alarm user. Alarm user permits. I have included this as a key part of compliance because many local jurisdictions have made this the responsibility of the alarm installation company. Many jurisdictions require that the installer provide information to the alarm user about the specific requirements in that jurisdiction, including the alarm user permit application, as well as information about the false alarm ordinance. Some jurisdictions require that the alarm company collect the user permit form and fee from the customer. Other jurisdictions require the alarm company to submit monthly or annual returns listing the site addresses for each of their accounts. A polling question should appear on your screen shortly. Please take a moment to answer it while we continue with the presentation. So now that we've covered the basic components of licensing and compliance, let's talk about a few specifics that are important when expanding your business. The most common ways a company might expand are by entering new territories or offering new products or services, such as monitoring services. Home automation is becoming a fast-growing market for security companies as well. You might also be expanding your employee base in ways that impact your licensing and compliance responsibilities, or increasing your market areas by hiring subcontractors. Each of these activities have licensing implications. Obviously, if you begin offering your services in another state, you'll need to understand their regulations at both the state and local levels. Likewise, if you expand your product or service offerings, you will need to know if the scope of your current license covers these activities. It is common for an alarm license to cover the sale, installation, service, and monitoring of alarm systems, but not always. For instance, if you begin monitoring in Tennessee, you'll be required to take another exam in order to add that category to your existing alarm license. If you would like to begin offering home automation equipment and services such as remote temperature and light controls, water sensors, automatic door locks, things like that, your alarm license is typically not going to cover these activities. In some jurisdictions, you'll be required to hold additional licenses such as electrical, HVAC, plumbing, or locksmith licenses. If you add employees, such as salespeople, technicians, or monitoring personnel, this will often involve employee registration. It's important for you to know the employee registration requirements for the states in which you're operating before you hire these employees. Most states will do a criminal background check, and if you've already hired someone that has a deniable offense on the record and you're unable to register them, you may find yourself in the position of having to terminate them after you've already spent money hiring and training them and submitting a non-refundable application fee for their registration. Typically, I'm sorry?
Kate, I'm sorry to interrupt. Kate, this is Jacqueline. I just wanted to go ahead and give some results on that poll so we can get that closed and see your screen. But the poll question, how is compliance handled in your company? We have about 80% who have voted, and it looks like the majority, 59%, use a dedicated compliance staff. 28% use an administrative person. 28% also use a qualifier or a business owner. And the remainder use outsource the compliance to a compliance service provider. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you begin using subcontractors, you must understand their licensing requirements as well. Depending on your business model, their licensing requirements may be very different from yours, and we're going to talk about that later in the presentation. One other thing about employee registrations I don't think I mentioned. Typically, a state will require that anyone who physically enters their state to perform alarm-related duties, such as selling, installing, or servicing, be registered. And some states will exempt out-of-state monitoring personnel, but some, like Texas, for example, have no exemption for out-of-state monitoring employees. So again, just be sure that you understand those employee registration requirements before you hire. But for now, it's important to understand what typically drives the requirement for a license. These are things that you want to consider when reviewing statutes or talking to the licensing authority. First, will you have a physical presence in the jurisdiction that you're entering? This is often important, particularly at the local level. If you don't have an office or an employee in that jurisdiction, then you may be exempt from a business license requirement, for example. In other jurisdictions, you might be required to hold the license if you derive revenue from customers located in that jurisdiction, even if you will have no physical presence there. At the state level, you'll want to pay particular attention to how the regulations define the covered license activity and whether your particular business model fits within that definition. As I said earlier, professional licenses fall into two camps, alarm licenses and low-voltage contractor licenses. Particularly in states that have low-voltage contractor licenses like Georgia, Idaho, Washington, and West Virginia, companies that subcontract all of their installation and service are often not required to hold the license. But there are others like New Mexico and Nevada where you are required to hold the license anyway if you offer to provide those services. For instance, by contracting with an end user to provide those services, even if you are actually performing them through a licensed third-party company. So how do you determine whether a particular license is required? First, review the website of the licensing authority. Many will have instructions and helpful facts posted, but you will also need to dig a bit deeper by reviewing the statutes. Most licensing boards post a link to the statutes on their website. You'll want to review the entire statute and pay particular attention to the definition, scope, and exemptions. If there's still any question as to whether you're covered by the license requirement or not, you should contact the licensing authority for clarification. Finally, you can submit a request for a declaratory statement from the board. So if you subcontract installation or service, it is vital that you have a good subcontractor compliance program in place. If you invest the time and resources to ensure your company is properly licensed and compliant, but you use subcontractors who are not, then you're putting your own licenses at risk. You may also be exposed to other risks if your subs aren't properly insured. So let's review some general requirements you'll want to have in place if you're using subcontractors. Know the licensing requirements for your subs, as I said earlier. These may be different from your own. For instance, if you sell and monitor alarm systems that you subcontract the installation and service, in many states you won't have to hold the contractor's license, but your install subs will. So it's important that you understand the licensing requirements for your company as well as your subcontractors. Also, keep in mind that some states, like Louisiana, it's illegal to subcontract alarm installation and service to individual contractors. You're only permitted to sub to other companies, who must, of course, be properly licensed themselves. Be sure that you have insurance requirements in place for your subcontractors. Consult with your insurance company regarding the appropriate minimum coverage amounts and any other requirements for risk mitigation. Normally, insurance companies will suggest that your company be included as additional insured with respect to your sub's general liability coverage. They might also suggest that this be provided on a primary non-contributory status, meaning that the sub's insurer is prevented from seeking its equitable or contractual independent right of recovery from your insurer. In other words, your sub's insurance will pay first. Your insurance will pay only what is in excess of the subcontractor's limit. By the way, if you need a good source for insurance, you might want to check out Security America Risk Retention Group. It was developed by ESA and offers affordable general liability and errors and omissions insurance coverage designed specifically for electronic life safety and security professionals. Their contact information is included at the end of the presentation. It goes without saying that you should have a written agreement with each of your subcontractors that defines the nature and terms of your business relationship, and hopefully that agreement has been vetted by a reputable attorney. I mention it here only to point out that this agreement should include information about your insurance and licensing requirements and require the subcontractor to provide updated certificates of insurance and licenses prior to expiration. Failure or refusal to provide evidence of required licenses or insurance should be grounds for default, and the contractor should not be allowed to perform installs or service until it's remedied. So you have identified the licensing requirements for your subs. You defined minimum insurance coverages required in order to protect your company from liability, and you have written agreements in place for every sub. Now you need an approved contractor list. The list must contain, number one, the states and or local jurisdictions in which the sub is approved to work based on your review of their licenses. Number two, the expiration date of each of their licenses. Number three, the expiration date of their written agreement with their company. And four, the expiration date of their liability and workers' comp policies. This list has to be constantly managed so that expiration dates are updated when licenses or insurance policies are renewed. If a subcontractor allows their license or insurance to lapse or their written agreement is not renewed, they should be removed from the approved contractor list immediately. Your install and service dispatchers need to be notified so that no additional work is sent to the contractor until the situation is resolved. It's also prudent to include finance in this notification, since they may act as a control against the issuance of work orders and payments to non-compliant subs. This is one area in which a document management system can be very helpful. It can be used to house the approved contractor list and automatically alert any users you identify as required readers of that document anytime a contractor is added or removed from the list. You can also use it to alert the person who manages the list of a pending license, insurance certificate, or contract expiration. A second polling question should appear on your screen now. This will be the final polling question, I believe. And if you can take a moment to answer it while we continue. So we've covered all of the basics of licensing and compliance for your company, as well as your subcontractors. It probably sounds like quite a bit of work, and it is. But now let's address a few areas in which you can save yourselves some time and or money. Reciprocity. If you will be operating in multiple states, you may be able to take advantage of reciprocity between those states to exempt yourself from certain licensing requirements. For instance, the North Carolina Electrical Board offers exemption from the trade exam for certain Georgia, Virginia, and South Carolina license holders. And Florida waives both the trade and business exam for North Carolina unlimited electrical licensees, California C10 electrical contractors, and Georgia Class 2 and unlimited low voltage license holders. For those of you who need the private alarm contractor license in Illinois, which by the way is required even if you subcontract installation and service, you can apply for licensure via endorsement. If approved, you won't be required to take the exam, which is only offered 2 to 3 times per year and only in Illinois. Illinois does not have any formal reciprocal agreement. Instead, they review each application for endorsement on a case-by-case basis. To be approved for endorsement, the state in which you are already licensed must have substantially similar licensing requirements and a similar endorsement mechanism. So their bar for approval is pretty high, but I have had endorsement applications approved for Florida Alarm Contractor 2 license holders.
Kate, this is Jacqueline again. We have the poll results for the question, what is your biggest compliance-related concern? And the majority with 71% picked that first option, time involved, determining licenses needed and how to obtain, 29% with missing renewal of continuing education deadlines, and the remaining 22% internal cost related to compliance. So I'll go ahead and close this poll.
Okay, thank you for those results. Qualifiers. Most professional licenses require a person to be designated as the company's qualifier. Typically, the qualifier must meet certain experience and education requirements and pass some sort of exam. Companies that are operating in a number of states may use different strategies when selecting their qualifier or qualifiers. In some companies, the owner or a senior manager holds all of the licenses. This can be difficult as one person has to take all of the exams and fulfill all of the continuing education requirements. It can also create a significant amount of work in the event that this person ceases for whatever reason to qualify the company. Another individual or individuals would quickly have to be put through the entry education and examination requirements for every state in which that qualifier has been removed. Other companies use different qualifiers in every state. This minimizes the amount of work required if any one qualifier leaves. What I recommend companies I work with is the following. Use the same qualifier in states that have substantially similar licensing requirements. For instance, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas all require the qualifier to have NTS 1 or 2. So you might want to consider using the same qualifier for all 4 of those states. I also recommend keeping the number of states per qualifier to no more than 5 if possible. If your qualifier will be in more than 5 states, then identify a second individual that meets the experience requirements and have them complete the same entry education or certification requirements. Some states will approve more than one qualifier, but this is generally not necessary. It involves extra expense, and states already allow a certain amount of time, typically 30 to 90 days, to get another individual qualified in the event the company loses their qualifier. Continuing education. It takes some planning, but reviewing the list of approved courses from each licensing board and looking for overlaps can be very beneficial. By registering your qualifiers and employees for courses that are approved in multiple states, you'll minimize their number of course hours and save money. For instance, the continuing education requirements for Florida, Tennessee, and North Carolina total 42 hours every 2 years. By selecting courses and providers that are approved in all 3 states, you can cut the number of hours to 23 and save about 50% if you're using the same qualifier in all 3 states. Most training providers do offer quantity discounts to companies with ongoing training needs, so don't be afraid to ask. A final note about training. If you have techs that must be registered in Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, and Tennessee, they'll need Alarm Level 1. There are several course providers that are approved in some of these states, but only the NTS course is approved in all 4. So be sure to consider that before selecting your course provider. ESA members, by the way, do get a significant discount on NTS courses, and the phone number and web address for NTS training will also be included at the end of the presentation. Licensing and compliance is a complex and time-consuming effort. To avoid missing license renewals and continuing education deadlines, document management software is very highly recommended. It is not only a labor-saving tool, but also helps you avoid penalties by automatically alerting you to renewal deadlines. You will want to upload all of your licensing and compliance documents to the system. For each document, you'll identify the expiration date or the date that you want to be alerted to the upcoming renewal deadline, and then identify who in your company will be notified. When the renewed license is received, you'll just upload that new version and enter the new expiration date. As an added benefit, management and other permissioned users can view licenses and other compliance documents at any time without having to pull it from a file or request it from your compliance staff. These programs make it much easier to stay on top of license renewals. Most programs will allow you to sort by any column, for instance, your expiration date, so that you'll get an instant snapshot of what licenses will need to be renewed next month, for instance. But probably the biggest savings of time and money come from outsourcing. A lot of time is spent in-house on researching and understanding compliance requirements, as well as the process for obtaining and maintaining licenses. Using a company like Compliance Management Solutions is not only cost-effective, but also accelerates compliance. Our contact information will be listed at the end of the presentation for anyone who would like more information. Also, be sure to check out the special offer for ESA members on e-savings. So I hope this information has been helpful. My contact information and that of Mark Grossman and Trevor Block, who helped to organize this webinar, is listed here for reference, as well as the contact information for National Training School and Security America Risk Retention Group. I'll leave this slide up in case you want to take down these numbers while I turn the presentation back over to Jacqueline.
Actually, Kate, I think I'll take it from here. Thank you very much. You did a great job at putting together a wealth of information in a very short period of time, so I appreciate your efforts on that. At this time, I just want to remind everybody, since you are muted, you can submit questions through the chat feature within the webinar. We do have a couple minutes to go through some questions. Jacqueline's been very nice in organizing them and kicking them to Trevor and I. So Trevor and I will attempt to try and navigate these questions for you for the next couple of minutes. The first biggest thing that came through actually several times was, is there a consolidated resource for all of this information state by state? I know that Jacqueline reminded me that ESA is actually putting together something like that together. It will be available free to ESA members. It's currently being revised, and the completion date is to be determined at this point. Jacqueline, is there any other centralized resources that someone could go to get state by state or maybe regional information?
There is currently a licensing guide available. If you go to our website, www.esa.org, and you go to the store, you will be required to log in as a member. So again, if you have questions about your member login, feel free to call our ESA headquarters. We can assist with that. But there is currently a guide that you can reference, but there are some states that are sending their updates, and our Director of Government Relations, John Schwat, is actually heading that up. So,
thank you. Trevor?
Hey, Kate, I have a question from one of the members, and I think they're asking specifically for some information on some of the newer features that we're starting to install as an industry, the Z-Wave deadbolts. So we're starting to delve into the locks and in the thermostats. Kate, can you maybe briefly tell us what you've done and what you have to do to look up some of these new offerings and these new options?
Sure. I have researched that in a number of states, not all of them, and I don't have the state-specific information in front of me right now. But generally speaking, a lot of times, and I think in these home automation packages, typically the thermostat will be wireless, and you're just removing an existing thermostat and popping a new wireless thermostat on the wall that can be controlled, from an iPod or something of that nature. And a lot of the states found that no additional licensure is required. Where the additional licensure tends to come in more frequently is with the lock, but it still varies from state to state, and there are quite a few states who do not license locksmiths, at least not at the state level. And if anyone, has a question about a specific state, if they want to take down my contact information that's on the screen and give me a call, I'd be happy to help them with that.
Thank you.
And Kate, do you find that to be a state issue, or are you dealing with that frequently on a local level?
Locksmith is typically more at the local level, whereas, a thermostat, if you're going to have an HVAC license required, it's not always the case, but if you do, then it's typically going to be at the state level more than the local level.
Hey, one of the other things that came through is, this task as it's presented, it does seem daunting. You mentioned that. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of deadlines, and there's a lot of dates that you need to keep track of. A couple folks have asked, do you have any recommendations for document management software, or is there other ways that they could track licensing and compliance requirements?
Well, yeah. First of all, if they don't have a document management system and they don't want to go to the expense of one right away, and you can always track all of this with just a simple Excel spreadsheet. But of course, that's going to be manual, and it's going to be prone to a lot more human error. Certainly a lot of time involved in keeping that updated. As far as the document management system goes, I have only actually used one, and I'll be glad to tell you which one it is. It's put out by Policy Tech, I think they're called, and it's called Policy and Procedure Manager. The reason that I used that one is it had all of those basic features, functionality in it that I mentioned, and it happened to be a very inexpensive application, at least in terms of document management software, because those systems can tend to get very expensive. I have had people tell me that SharePoint might work as well, but I've never used it, so I can't really tell you one way or the other on that one. But PPM, or Policy Procedure Manager, that one definitely will work, and it will provide those automated alerts so that kind of manages itself, or prompts you when it's time for you to do something.
Hey, Kate, I have another question for you. As it relates to your 8 components of compliance, is the order that you presented them the intended order for the pursuit of licensing compliance?
For the most part, yes. I mean, you are always going to have to start with the Certificate of Authority, and as soon as you get that Certificate of Authority, that's what opens you up to the state filing requirements. And you'll need those in place. You'll need that Certificate of Authority before you can apply for your state licenses, and you don't want to apply for local licenses generally until you have state license in place. But of course, like employee registration, you're going to do that as soon as you have your state license, whether you've got your local licenses in place or not.
Thank you. One of the other, there's a couple of specific questions that came through. You had mentioned that when you are attempting, many of our members probably are trying to expand their businesses by territory. And you had mentioned that when you're going into a foreign state, you can use, I think you termed it a non-commercial agent, like a friend or relative, to satisfy the registered agent requirements. But I know that if I ask my mom to do this, the question would be, does this person assume any legal risk for providing that service for me?
Okay. On the applications where you list your registered agent, some of those applications, the registered agent you list doesn't even sign the application. Even on the applications where they do sign, I have never really seen any legal language that, makes them liable for, say they don't forward a legal document to you, service of process, that kind of thing. What is going to be more important is that the company is depending upon them to forward those documents. And if they fail to do so, I mean, once they receive it, once that registered agent receives it, the state or whoever served it on you is going to they're going to consider it served. So even if you didn't get it, you have been served. And therefore, you want to be sure whoever you put in that position is, either professional or very trustworthy, because you are relying upon them.
And Kate, another question that's come in from the audience. Do you have a good source for training specific to each state's examinations and their testing process?
Is that so? Not continuing ed, but specifically the technical and trade examinations for the qualifier?
Yes.
I generally don't use the courses that prepare. I don't have a lot of people ask for courses to prepare them for an examination. The QAs that I've worked with generally just go straight to the examination itself. Now, the candidate information bulletin that is put out for every technical and trade exam and business and law exam that these various states offer, they will normally include sample questions. They'll include reference materials. Some of them are recommended. Some of them are also allowed in the examination itself if it's open book. So the candidate information bulletin will include a lot of very helpful information like that will help you prepare for the exam.
And another thing, Kate, if I could just add, NTS, the National Training School that's sponsored by ESA, I think is a very good resource to get some of that technical training. You had mentioned in your presentation that, some level 1 and some level 2 NTS curriculum is sought after for some certifications. So if I could just market the NTS training school, I think that's also a good resource. One of the other questions that came in was some HIPAA requirements. With the increasing number of PERS systems out there for our elderly population, have you come across any requirements that HIPAA would actually put on the industry?
I have not run across anything like that yet.
Okay. Trevor, is there anything else?
Kate, one more question that I have is, as we've talked about some of these qualifiers, do they need to be an employee of the company?
Most of the time, yes. There are a few states that do not require them to be an employee Michigan, as an example, they do allow non-employees to be license holders. Until recently, that license holder had to be a resident of Michigan, but that is no longer required. The company is now required to have an office there, but the qualifier does not have to be an employee. But that is really an anomaly. Almost all other states do require that they be an employee.
Kate, thank you. You know, I think the information you presented was very informative, very clear. You know, I personally can't stress how important it is to have a solid program to maintain these compliance issues. If there's no more questions, and it does not look like we have anything right at the moment, I'd like to remind everyone that a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be available in the ISP Resource Library at esaweb.org. And also as a reminder, this webinar is worth 0.1 CEU credit. And if you're interested in receiving attendance verification, please email Jacqueline. You see her her email at the bottom of the presentation slide. And one other message that has come in per John Twat, the Director of Government Relations for ESA. Some state chapters are now considering licensing bills in their 2013 legislative sessions. You can briefly list some items that should be in each bill. We think, you know, including the NTS training and background and federal checks is very important. But if you have some suggestions from what you're hearing locally, please make sure that you forward those up to us. And John does a fantastic job dealing with local issues. You know, if you've ever had a you know, a legislative bill that was not looking like it was going to be beneficial to us, he does a great job being able to communicate, understand what the legislators are trying to do, and get in front of these problems before they truly become laws. So a great message and a follow-up from John. So once again, thank you for participating in today's webinar, sponsored by the ESA Installation and Service Professionals Group. We do appreciate your time, and we do hope you found the content useful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send an email to Mark or to myself or to Kate.